Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
I think I fell into the same trap that I did in one of the past podcasts, but I'm over prioritizing perfection. Like I had this thought in my mind where I really want this podcast to be as perfect as it can be. And because of that, I've just been pushing it off and pushing it off because I want to refine my ideas as much as they can be refined before I share them. And that's why this podcast has been pushed off in the past like 2, 3 weeks. But I'm just going to dive right into it. The story I want to share today is a pretty quick one. There's just one time coming back from rugby, and of course, we get the worst times because we're a club sport. So I want to say this went from like 8 to 10 p.m. So super, super late, or maybe not that late. We'll say probably like 6:30 to 9 or something like that. I don't know. But practice ends at 9, and all I want to do because I'm super exhausted from practice, I just want to go home. On my way home, grab some food, eat, go through all the routines, shower and rest. And so I remember we wrapped up practice. That's all I wanted to do. So I was walking home, went in, grabbed some food, and I was just grubbing as I always do after practice. And then out of nowhere, this random stranger comes up and bothers me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what do you want? That wasn't really what I was thinking, but I was like, okay, what's up? And this person says, hey, would you mind being a part of our project for this toaster that we're working on? And I was so confused, like, okay. I just agreed to do it because honestly, at that point, I'm like, you gotta have some cojones to go to a complete random stranger, especially one who looks like me, like, well, completely locked in. I was probably listening to a podcast, probably just like trying to finish my food so I can hurry up and go rest. But they had the cojones to walk up to me and interrupt my meal and be like, hey, are you willing to be a part of this? And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm down for that. I'm always willing to help out. And so we went through it and they were working on this toaster project, some weird toaster project. I didn't fully understand it, but they were asking me these questions like, oh, how many toasters have you had in your lifetime? Or how do you normally use a toaster? Or what's the usual setting you set on the toaster? And all these random questions that I had no idea about. I was like, bro, I don't know how many toasters I've had in my life. Like for you, whoever's listening to this, how many toasts have you had in your life? Really pause and think about that. Okay, it wasn't a serious question. You don't have to think too hard about it, but they were asking me all these toaster questions. And I'm like, bro, I don't even know about this stuff. And honestly, there's no real moral to the story. The big moral of the story is like just ask because people are usually willing to help out. But that story connects to the theme of this episode. Like the title of this podcast is all about toasters and cats and the problems with them. And when I say toaster and cat problems, you're probably wondering what the heck does that even mean? Well, you're going to know by the end of this episode. The gist of the idea is that in life, there are problems. And you probably know this because you probably had some problems in your life. And we have these problems, but the difference or one distinction that we can draw between these problems is whether they're a cat problem or a toaster problem. Now, what do I mean by this? The thing that I mean is that we have complex and complicated problems. Now, let me define what that means. Complicated problems are those problems that are like toasters, where they're usually hard to understand, but after you crack it the first time, it's pretty easy to replicate and it's pretty easy to solve. Like, for example, let's take a toaster. I don't know whoever made the first toaster, but you can imagine that when they made the first toaster, it was probably easy to make the second one and then the third one. And then eventually they make a whole warehouse that produces and mass manufactures these toasters. Because once they solve it the first time, they can replicate it over and over and over again. Because there's not that many moving parts to it. It's like you got the plug, and then you got the thing that heats the bread up, and then you got the little dial that you can set it on. Like, boom, there you go, toaster. Now, toaster problems are very, very different from complex problems, from cat problems. And the way this analogy goes is that let's say I give you a cat and I tell you your job is to take care of this cat, which on the surface seems like a simple problem. Like all you gotta do is take care of the cat and make the cat happy. But when you actually do the thing, you realize that there's so many moving parts to this cat. There's like feeding it and taking out the litter and giving it water and giving it a place to sleep and a certain temperature that I like to sleep at and different preferences that it has around food and sleeping and all the different things that goes in to taking care of this cat. But let's say you figure all of that out. So finally, you go through all these things and you figured out that this cat likes these things and how to make it happy. Now, let's say I give you a new cat and you're tasked with the same problem. You got to figure out how to make this cat happy, take care of it. And you're like, okay, this is easy. I already get this before. I'll just apply the same thing that I did with the first cat and apply it to the second cat. But once you actually do it, it's a lot easier in theory than it is in practice because you realize that these two cats are different and there's so many other variables that go into it. I want to run through 7 differences I see between complex and complicated problems. And I got this from the article that I found this week. So feel free to check out the Notion page. You have a full thing there. Let me run through some of these key points. Causality. And this is when you're trying to figure out what's wrong. So in complicated problems, the toaster problems, you can take it apart if it's broken and figure out what's going on. Is it the button? Is it some coil that's missing? And in that way, you can pinpoint the problem. You see exactly what's causing it. But if you're trying to raise a cat and your cat is acting weird, maybe it's hissing at you, it's a lot harder to figure out what's causing that thing. Is it hungry? Is it sick? Is it bored? Is it scared? There's all these different possibilities, which makes it complex. Number 2, linearity. And this is where you can really see cause and effect. So if you take a toaster and you put some bread in it, if you toast it for long enough, then it'll get crispier and darker and more burnt. If you leave it in there super quick, then it won't be as toasted. There's a clear cause and effect with what you put in and what you get out. Cats, on the other hand, they can be weird because you might give a cat a treat and then all of a sudden it hisses at you and you don't know what's going on. You can see how this example ties into the last one, causality, because you don't know what's causing. Number 3 is reducibility. And this is being able to take it apart. With complicated problems, with toaster problems, you can take toasters apart and really look into the inner workings, see how things work and come together. But with cats, I mean, unless you want to kill the thing, which I wouldn't recommend if the mission is to keep it happy, you can't take it apart. Definitely not in the same way you can take toasters apart. Number 4 is controllability. With a toaster, you're the one in charge. Like when you push the button down or when you take it apart, there's not some other in the way making decisions. It's just you controlling the toaster. Whereas with cats, they have a mind of their own and you can influence it with maybe having some toys, maybe some treats, but ultimately it's up to the cat to make those decisions. Number 5 is openness and how it deals with the outside world. If you have a toaster, the toaster doesn't care about whether a dog is barking or there's construction outside or it's raining. It doesn't matter. The toaster is just chilling. But with cats, they interact with everything. If they see a bird flying outside the window, if a loud noise comes on, that's going to affect the cat. Number 6 is knowability. And let's get into some really deep stuff, talking about like, can you really know anything? But skimming over that, the whole idea about this attribute is that complex problems are in a lot of ways unknowable. Like with toasters, there's a manual and you can read the manual and figure it out. With cats, there's no manual on cats. Like, sure, you'll have a textbook that tries to go into all the different things of how to raise a cat and stuff. But every day, more and more people are discovering new things about cats that we didn't know before. And with toasters, they're just toasters. Like, no one's making some cool new discovery about toasters. And the final one, number 7, is creativity and adaptability. If you have a toaster, let's say you get one from like Target or something, you put it on the counter. The toaster isn't going to get better and better as you use it. It's not going to learn like, oh, this is the perfect setting, unless it's like a smart toaster. But even then, it's not going to continue adapting like 100 years from now. Cats are different. They evolve and they adapt and they'll change to the environment. So that's the rundown of this whole analogy, this problems with cats and toasters and complicated versus complex problems. Now you can see how this analogy can apply to a whole bunch of other aspects. Like instead of taking care of cats, take care of kids. And for the parents listening to this, you definitely know how it is. Like I've seen it in myself and even my brother, because we are so different. But as our mom was raising us, she had to apply different things to both of us because kids, me, I am a complex problem. And the things that my mom applied to my brother won't necessarily apply to me. And that is very different from toaster problems, where once you figure out the first toaster, you can copy and paste that into the second one and bam, there you go. You got a toaster. Now I bring this all up because something that I've been struggling with and I've noticed it, especially over these past couple episodes, over the past couple months, is that I think I've been looking and finding complicated solutions for complex problems. And a perfect example of that is my diet. Because realistically, like if you look at the problem of calories or losing weight, all it is calories in versus calories out. And if you burn more calories than you eat, then you're going to lose weight. And that is a very simple way of putting it. But when you try to put that into practice, you'll find that there's these little things called human emotions. And human emotions, they tend to throw a wrench in these complicated problems and turn them into complex problems. They turn these toaster problems that are super easy to copy and paste from person to person, and they turn them into cat problems where they don't necessarily apply perfectly where you can copy and paste. And I think that's what I've been trying to do. Because on the face of it, I mean, I just been trying to track my calories, work out more, get my walks in, do some cardio, and boom, there you go, losing weight. But I didn't really consider this other variable, this thing called human emotions and mental health, and how that plays a role into all of this. And so that's what I want to continue on with this episode. Is now that I figured out that this thing of nutrition, of diet, is a complex problem because of these things called human emotions, I think the next step is to figure out what the heck are these emotions. And so that's what I've been doing, reading a whole bunch of books, listening to a whole bunch of podcasts, trying to figure out this thing called emotions. When I was philosophizing about emotions, and it was like in class earlier today, honestly, pulled out my iPad and just started drawing some things. So the things that I'm going to go over, I'll put it in the Notion page. Definitely check that out because seeing it on paper will help visualize the things that I'm talking about right now. But the first thing I want to go over is trying to find some type of definition for what emotions actually are. And I was wrestling with this so much. And honestly, I don't think this is a super clear definition because it might change in the future. But here's the definition I came up with, very heavily influenced by this book called How Emotions Are Made. But the definition is this: emotions are your brain's best guess based on experiences. Now, here's an example of that. In the book, the author, she talks about how there's this moment where she was going to go up on stage and give this TED talk. And before she goes up, she was super nervous. Her palms were sweating and she was breathing heavy and she was kind of shaking a little. And you could tell, or at least from the outside, it seemed like she was nervous. But before she went up there, she's like, I am determined. I am excited. And she does this thing called getting her butterflies in order. That's what she calls it. I could totally relate to that. Like, I go through something very similar, or at least I used to a lot, especially with these high school football games. Every time before every snap of the ball or every game that I would do, even rugby, I would get super, super nervous. And I would tell myself I'm nervous based on these body signals that I'm getting. The fact that I feel hot and my body's heating up and I'm sweating, shaking, breathing heavy, all these body signals. And on top of that, there's all the external signals of the crowd going crazy, the Friday night lights, the loud cheers, the fact that this is a game and I'm about to go hit someone. And my brain took all of that information, all of these experiences, and it said, you know what? I think you're probably nervous. And so spits that out. And I think that's what emotions are. Now, there's a whole host of reasons that, especially, I think Lisa is her name, Dr. Lisa Barrett, I want to say. But she dives into all these different reasons why emotions aren't some objective thing like, okay, if you look at a face, that person is clearly sad or that person is clearly angry. It's because even when you think about it for yourself, you have different bodily reactions and it looks different when you're angry in some circumstances. Like sometimes when I'm angry, I want to go punch someone, or I just want to go like sit down and eat, or other times when I'm angry, I just want to keep to myself or go to sleep. And those are all very different ways of exhibiting the same quote unquote emotion of anger. And when I thought super hard about this, it seemed to really connect with my framework of beliefs and how we form beliefs. As a quick run through about beliefs, the way it works is you got some actions that you do. From those actions, you get results or experiences. And then from those experiences, you form beliefs. And then with those beliefs, you do certain actions, which create certain experiences, which form certain beliefs. And it goes round and round in a circle. And it's a cycle like that. And I think emotions are very, very similar to that, where you have these experiences, and that'll be your body signals and your environment. And then you interpret those beliefs. And that's what emotions are. It's your brain's best guess at how you feel. And then based on those emotions, that will lead you to do certain actions. And now the key thing here, something to note, is that the emotions don't necessarily determine your actions. Like, for example, it's possible for you to feel super overwhelmed and still do the work anyways. And it's totally possible for you to feel super scared because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And so in that way, emotions, just like beliefs, they're self-affirming. But another definition that I really, really like, or maybe there's just a property about emotion, But another thing is that they change your motivation to act. For example, let's go with the definition of courage. If you feel the emotion of fear, then that will by all means make your emotion or make your motivation to act lower. And in the opposite way, if you feel the emotion of excitement, then your motivation to act will be higher. And I think that's another way of looking at emotion in this way that will make it more concrete, at least for me. Like this operationalizes the definition a lot more. If I can think through like what the heck are emotions in the first place? Because this is something that I've been thinking through and struggling with for the past month. I mean, it's the reason that I haven't done this podcast in ages, is because of these things called emotions. Another thing about these emotions is that they're subjective. It's like what one person would call fear based on all of the same experiences, another person might call excitement or determination. Like what I call butterflies is what another person might call excitement. And just like beliefs, I think the mindset plays a super important role in this because we take these experiences and we interpret, and that's what emotions are. They're the best guesses from all of these inputs. And the mindset is the glasses through which we perceive those experiences. So the reason why I may look at certain experiences differently from you, which is different from another person, is because we might have different mindsets around those body signals or those environments. Here's an example. Let's go back to the game analogy. When I went into football games, I was super, super nervous. And I would always go on with my cousin. And maybe he felt the same things that I was going through. Like maybe he was breathing heavy, he got a little sweaty, maybe he was shaking a little, and he was in the same environment as Friday Night Lights. But to me, I had this emotion of nervousness. Whereas for him, with a different mindset, he might look at that and be like, oh, I'm excited for this game. I can't wait to go and hit someone. Now, hopefully that made sense. And if it didn't, feel free to go to the description of this podcast episode, wherever you're listening to this, and check out the Notion pages that'll have more info on there. But now I want to move on to the virtue vice scale. And I love, love, love this framework as I've been thinking more and more about it. As a reminder, the whole premise of this idea is that any virtue pushed to the extreme becomes a vice. And so if we can picture our dream identities, like imagine the person that you want to become at the very end of your life, the values that that person has, they likely will have to balance two virtues together. And this is an example. I have emotion on one side, but that's a virtue of someone being emotional. But then on the other side is that person being logical. Now, these two things don't always have to butt heads. They don't always have to go against each other, but in some ways they are. Like if I'm operating on my emotions, in some ways it applies that I'm not thinking through with just my brain. Because logically, calories in, calories out. I mean, all you got to do is put the fork down. But then emotions play a role in there all day. And when you push logic to the extreme, I think that's where you get like extreme stoicism. And this is basically where you have no emotion at all. Everything is all black and white, clear cut, go by the book, go by logic, which honestly gets into some really, I think, messy territory, especially when you start considering like these moral dilemmas and moral problems. I think that's where extreme stoicism kind of falls off. And then on the other side, when emotions are pushed to the extreme, I think that's when you become like an emotional roller coaster, where every little thing that happens, you have this huge emotional reaction. Oh, I woke up late today. Man, I beat myself up for the rest of the day. Oh, I got an A on this test. I'm the best person alive. Man, I missed my workout. I'm so lazy. Why didn't I do that? Like, it's when you have all these ups and downs from every little thing. That's when you become an emotional roller coaster. So I found myself that I tend to lean definitely more towards the logical side, for sure. Lately, I've been leaning hard toward the emotional roller coaster side, where I've just been a complete emotional roller coaster, like beating myself up for every little thing that I miss and do wrong. And this gets into the next thing I want to talk about. Continuing with this virtue vice scale, this next thing is balancing forgiveness and accountability. And I was thinking about this in the context of managing the Nijin News team, holding my team accountable, but also forgiving them if they miss deadlines and stuff. And so a perfect example of that was this past weekend. Some of the members on the team, they missed certain things that we agreed for them to do. Like maybe it was write an article or maybe it was do a social media post, but they missed those things. And so usually I'm like super relaxed. I'm like, oh, you're all good. As long as you get it done, that's all that matters. But then when I do that, I don't have any accountability on them. I'm not like holding them to a certain standard. But I've especially seen how this balance of that works on me because Sometimes I hold myself accountable. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get these many steps. I'm trying to get these many calories, get these many workouts. But then I don't forgive myself. And I'm like, when I miss something, I'm like, man, why didn't I do that? I need to get that done. But lately, I've been on the other side of things where I've been forgiving myself too much. And I'm not actually holding myself to a certain standard that I want to become. And so let's go with this analogy. Any virtue pushed to the extreme becomes a vice. So I think when accountability is pushed to the extreme, I think that's when I get shame. Like when I hold myself accountable and I push that to the extreme, I get the self talk of I am bad instead of guilt, which is I did a bad thing. It becomes shame where I am bad and I give myself this moral value. And I honestly think that's what I've been doing. When forgiveness is pushed to the extreme, I think that is enabling. It's when you allow bad behavior because enabling traditionally is used in the forms of addiction. Like if I allow someone who's super close to me continue their use of drugs, and I'm not exactly stopping them or actively helping them, but I'm just enabling. I am allowing it to happen. And in that sense, I'm allowing bad behavior. And when I say bad in this context, and the way I define it personally, I think bad is something that goes against my dream identity and that person's values. And my dream identity, of course, is Sisu Alaisi, Jesus Christ. And so in both examples of this virtue vice scale, of course, Jesus was logical. Of course, he was emotional. There were times where he held others accountable, and there were also times where he forgave others. And he is the person I look to when I'm trying to balance these two virtues. And honestly, I'm in the thick of it. I'll talk more about it in the life update, but it's been a ride. We'll say that. It's been a wild, wild ride in this past month. But to wrap up this section of the podcast, which I might just call this section of the podcast like musings or something, it's like philosophical philosophizer thinkings that I have. Last thing is this equation for happiness, which is what you have divided by what you want. I think the easiest way of looking at this is by considering the two extremes. On one extreme, you have someone who is, let's say, a billionaire. They got $1 billion in the bank account. They got everything they could possibly need, but they want $1 trillion. They want like a whole country or something like that. And so in that example, because they want so much and they have a lot, but they just want so much more. In that example, they wouldn't be happy. And the other extreme of this happiness equation reminds me of like going back to the islands. And I remember I went back to Tonga and I saw these group of kids, probably like 10 of them, group of little Tongan kids, and they're all running around, probably don't even have shoes on, playing rugby with one of those 1 liter Coke bottles filled up with rocks. Like they don't even have a ball. They use this Coke bottle filled up with rocks as their ball. And they just look like they're having the time of their lives. And that's because even though they don't have a lot, their wants is smaller. And so the two ways to look at this is you can either focus on the top of the equation, is increasing your haves, or you can focus on the bottom of the equation and decreasing your wants. So those are some cool takeaways that I had from this week, or really this past month. And let me run through the weekly roundup real quick. The weekly roundup, this is like a section where I go through and talk about like quotes or articles or podcast episodes that I had from the past. Usually it's a week. In this case, it's a month. The first quote, I thought this was pretty funny, but also pretty indicative of my situation. It was just a quote by St. Augustine, one of the saints in the early church, or maybe not early church, but one of the saints who was Christian. And he says this, he says, Lord, give me chastity and self-control, but none. And I just thought that was hilarious because you have this guy, it's like, oh my goodness, please help me be righteous. Please help me do what I want to do, but not yet because I really want to keep doing this thing that I'm doing right now. And actually, I find myself in a pretty similar situation, especially when it comes to food, because I tell myself this all the time, actually. And there's this narrative going on in my head of I shouldn't eat that, but I really want to. And so I might say, okay, Dean, this is the day I want to eat healthy, but not yet. And it connects back to this idea of balancing forgiveness and giving myself a break versus accountability and holding myself to a certain standard. The question I came on for this episode, I had a fellow podcast who was talking about what silly story am I telling myself? And I thought this was such a great way to put it. Like I was walking to class and I was honed in, but when I heard this question said out loud, I really stopped to think about it. I paused the thing, looked up in the air, and I was kind of scratching my head. Okay, took myself out of myself and asked myself, Dean, what silly story are you telling yourself, bro? And that really hit because I think the silly story I'm telling myself is that I don't have control and I don't have agents. And that is a silly, silly story because I do. And I know I do. But it's a story that keeps playing in my head over and over and over again. And I think it's the reason why I keep giving into these urges and these emotional things like turning to food. The I found is just talks about like happiness and emotional self-management. It was a really good podcast. Would highly recommend. It dives into some pretty cool things, but I think one of the biggest takeaways is that having a purpose bigger than yourself is super important for happiness because it brings so much peace and perspective. Or even if you're not religious, like remind yourself how small you are. And I won't talk about this. Reminding myself how small I am in the context of this vast, vast universe. Like there's this YouTube video. Look it up. It's like this YouTube video where they start off in the world and they slowly zooming out and they show you as like a small dot on the earth. And they keep zooming out and they show the earth a small dot in the solar system. And they keep on zooming out and the solar system a small dot in the galaxy. And they keep on zooming out and the galaxy is a small dot in the whole entire universe. And it really gets you thinking about like, dang, I am tiny in this grand scale. And that was a really good episode. And then after the book, I ran through this book like one night. I randomly downloaded it and I started reading it. Didn't intend to finish the book, but I just so happened to just like finish it because it was a super short read. But it's called The 2 Hour Cocktail Party. And it's basically just a super practical and tactical guide on how to run these small little get-togethers or gatherings. And the reason that I read it was because that's what I'm trying to do as I build Nisha Nexus, which I'll talk more about. Actually, I'll talk more about it right now because I guess we're in the life update portion. And the first part of the update is my work. So as I'm building Nisha Nexus now, so far there's 6 people who are signed up, 6 founders, all Pacific Islander, all Utah based, pulling up June 1st for this rugby game. So that's the plan. And I'm trying to think through how to make this, especially the first event, the first meeting, as valuable as possible, like break the ice as much as possible and build these super genuine connections in this untraditional, unproductive environment, which is the whole goal of this thing. We're really looking forward to that. And on the real, I made this like Slack channel, which is meant to be an online community for the group. And in the channel, it was just a complete bust because people aren't really responding. It's not really active. And I was really hoping to do like a speed dating Zoom meeting before the thing. But we'll see how that plays out. Honestly, the biggest thing is that I'm at a crossroads with this project, Nisha Nexus, Nisha News. There was a guy who came in the other day, one of the guest speakers for the garage for the family dinner. And he's a super accomplished guy. Like came up through the traditional finance route and then did a startup and then the startup was successful, so he sold it. And now he's on the other side of the table investing in startups. That's what he does. And he came in, he gave a whole bunch of tactical advice. And the very first thing he said that he has to remind CEOs all the time is that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And he had so many stories where he was sharing about CEOs who got distracted because there was this shiny object that they wanted to go after and they forgot about what the main thing is. So share that piece of advice. And I was sitting there like, man, that is like directly hitting me right now because it's what I'm doing. There's 2 things going on right now. There's Nisha News and Nisha Nexus. And both of those things on the surface might seem very similar. They're both for Pacific Islanders. The whole mission behind both of them is like connect our community together. But as I'm building it, it's so different because on the front end, it's the same idea, like having conversations and getting people to join the network. But on the back end and actually fulfilling on those sales is very, very different. And so I came to the point where I was like, okay, there's only 2 ways I continue. Either one, I somehow find a way to consolidate the 2 and make them cohesively work together, or 2, I kill one of those and completely shut it down, go all in on the other thing. At first, honestly, and I'm still trying to think through this, at first I was going to kill Nisha News and say, okay, I'm going all in on Nisha Nexus. But after talking with some of the team members, and they were like, look, Dean, we'll pick up the slack. Like, make a list of everything that you do for each of them and start delegating. And it made me realize that I was looking at my team as the biggest constraint. Like, they're the reason why I can't do more with Nisha News or Nexus. And I realized that it's my fault. Like, the reason that they are kind of iffy and don't know what they're doing is because I'm super iffy And my vision for this thing is super blurry. So of course they don't know what's going on because I don't even know what's going on. And I'm the one who's supposed to be steering the ship. So that's what I realized is that they're not holding this startup back. It's myself. And so maybe that's what I do tomorrow. Like block off an hour or two of time and really think through critically like what the business plan is or what we're actually going to do with this thing. Because I think I honestly modified a way to consolidate it with wearenesian.com. I bought that domain like the other week and I was like, okay, that domain is too good to pass up. So I think that's what I do and scale the media side to hopefully bolt on this community side. Run Nesian Nexus as a short-term way to build those connections early on, get buzz for a future launch in future cities, but really lock into the media side as a way to generate that demand. Okay, boom, there we go. Like I just started thinking through it right now, but I think that's the move. I'll get back to you and report on how that goes next week. But yeah, things are moving. Things are moving for sure. Next update is with my people. It was really, really good this past weekend because I finally got time to relax. Not only relax, but really, really just chill and hang out with my people. The Hawaiian family out here that took me in, they are a complete blessing in my life. Because usually what had happened was this. I would have this open time on my schedule, on my calendar, especially on the weekends, where all of Saturday wasn't scheduled out. So I would just have all this open time. And I would fill the time with anime and ice cream. Like that's literally what I would do. Is I would go at like, let's say 11 p.m. when everything else is closed, grab 2 pints of ice cream from 7-Eleven and just go to work on that while I'm binging some anime. And that's what I've been doing for the past, I want to say a week or two. And that's the reason why I haven't been doing these podcasts. Because instead of a podcast, I would be binge eating on ice cream, watching anime. And so another reason why I didn't do this podcast is because it felt like imposter syndrome. Like, what the heck? Why am I talking about being your best self and dream identity this, dream identity that, when I'm over here just binge eating ice cream and I'm not even living out the values that I'm trying to preach on this podcast? So I put it off for ages. And eventually what I realized was this. I don't do this podcast because I'm perfect. And I don't do this podcast because I'm trying to show everyone else that, oh, here are all the things I thought of and I don't struggle at all. Or I realized I was being selfish by not doing this podcast because the purpose of this is to record my journey because I cannot wait from a year or 2 or 10 years from now to look back at this very episode and be like, dang, that's where I was at. Look how far I've come. That's what it's all about. And the cooler part is for someone else out there to be listening to this right now and be like, dang, I'm going through something similar. Maybe it's with food, maybe it's with drugs or anything that it could be. Be like, huh, this guy goes through it too. I guess I'm not the only one. And by no means is anyone alone with this. And sometimes, not even sometimes, I gotta remind myself of this too. It's like, I'm not alone in this whole journey. There's so many people out there who are going through it too. Just gotta find them. And that probably gets into the last part of this update, which is myself. And like I've been talking about this whole episode, and I think that the last episode was, the topic goes around like how I plan to overcome binge eating. Spoiler alert, it was a failure by external metrics, but by internal metrics, I learned something. I learned that this journey of dieting and nutrition and lifestyle, all these things, I learned that this journey is a complex problem where there are so many variables at play and there's so many possible things that could be causing a problem. And the problem itself will continue to evolve. And I can't fully figure out the system behind the problem because it's complex. And I think the way to solve complex problems is by failing forward. And that's the whole theme behind this first season of this podcast is failing forward. And so I hope that this podcast and this episode specifically is a reminder, not only to you who is listening to this, but to myself, to my future self, who will definitely be listening in. This is what it's all about. This past month, undoubtedly, this past couple weeks, undoubtedly was a failure, especially by body weight percentage and tracking my food and hitting my calories, all those things. And so what's the next step? It's to fail forward. So I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm going to continue to drive by these ideals and hopefully be more consistent with these podcast episodes. But thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you in the next one. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok see you.